Because this is such an important thing, your Illustrator is one of the most important selections that you will make. That artwork that they are going to provide you on your children's book is going to make or break the book, right? You can have an okay story with beautiful illustrations and it can be very successful. If you have a really good story and really lousy illustrations, it's not going to sell. Same thing with cover design and things like that, right? So not only am I focusing so much on Illustrator because it's such an important part of building a children's book, but it's also can be one of the most stressful parts. Working with an illustrator, it's where a lot of nightmare stories reside from, war stories from previous authors. So I wanted to really go through a good, strong foundation of what we need to get done and what the tips that I have that I've used over time to get better with selecting illustrators that really do a fantastic job for me. So let's start here. Where can you find your illustrator? When I first started, it was referrals from other authors. I joined a lot of Facebook groups, and many of you are members of author illustrator groups on Facebook. There's also the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which you might have heard it referred to as SCBWI. They have local chapters and a national organization of writers and illustrators. If you were to look up your local SCBWI site, then you can see postings from illustrators where you can find all of their portfolios and contact information. So you can reach out and connect to people through organizations like that. I have a local author group in Rhode Island also. That's kind of like authors and illustrators. So you can find those kinds of things with groups that you have and associations like the Authors Guild. Or some people go to freelancing sites. And I would just say, be very careful because many people, many authors I've worked with that have gone to Fiverr have really lived to regret it. There's some amazing gems in there with like new illustrators that are just getting started and they're willing to illustrate very inexpensively. There are a lot more, a lot more that are just unscrupulous, very poor quality illustrations, and they'll do a page of an illustration for $5, $10, $20. But the quality and what they're doing isn't good. Some of them were basically just pulling up clip art and passing it off as their own, or they were grabbing illustrations from other illustrators and putting it in their portfolio. So it looked really great. But then once you get started with them, you find out that that's not their skill set at all. There are other more reputable sites like Upwork and Reedsy where you can, find freelancers. If you are a brand new author, I would say stay away from brand new illustrators because you're going to want to work with someone that knows what they're doing. I mean, that would be my recommendation. And then you also will have a list of my Self-Publishing Made Simple list of illustrators that I've put together for you. And these are guys that I have worked with or have illustrated projects for my authors and have done amazing work that I became aware of them through other authors. And they do an amazing job. So I've continued to grow my list and expand the list so that you can have a better indication of those that you can, pretty much you can trust the ones that are on the list. Every once in a while, I have to pull one off because a resource that was doing a great job, something happens and things go south. But more often than not, I'm adding to it instead of taking it away. So now if you know where to find them, what is it that you're looking for? First and foremost, do they work in the style that you are attracted to? And the only way you're going to figure out what style you're attracted to is to peruse a lot of the portfolios that are out there for illustrators. If you're browsing author illustrator groups on Facebook, or you're going to Instagram and you do, search for hashtag illustrators or kidlit art, that's another hashtag that's very popular for illustrators, and just save some of the styles that really resonate with you, so that you can show people and say, this kind of style is what I'm looking for. I also recommend that they are willing to accept a work for hire contract. I know that you can move forward with a regular contract, pay royalties, partner with an illustrator. There's a lot of things you can do. I like to keep it simple, and I like to make sure that the author is protected. So my recommendation when I ever, start with a new illustrator, that's one of my first questions is, are you willing to accept a work for hire contract? And what a work for hire contract gives you, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, but basically you own the artwork. You're just paying that individual to complete it on your behalf, but you own the copyright to the artwork. It becomes yours. You get the source code, and nobody else owns any part of your vision or your characters. So what else are we looking for? We're looking for their level of experience and skill set. There are illustrators that are just brand new. There are some that have been doing this for 10 years. So depending on where you are as an author, and like I said, for those who are brand new authors, I would definitely try to stay away from a brand new illustrator, because it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. And if you do pair up with a brand new illustrator, then make sure you have an experienced mentor or project manager helping the two of you get through it. And then I put in here, consider their performance on your sample request. And I'm just going to pause that thought, because I'm going to go into exactly what I recommend you do to kind of vet out which illustrator you're going to work with. And it involves getting a sample. And then during the process of working through this sample, you're going to have an opportunity to see how they are with their communications, how quickly they turn around any change requests that you have on your sample, and how does the location and time zone impact your ability to communicate and impact the budget. These are the things that we look for, or that I recommend that you look for when you're thinking about an illustrator. Typically, this is the request that I make, whether I'm instant messaging someone or direct messaging them on Instagram, or whether I'm in a Facebook group. If I'm introducing the topic for the first time, I'm looking for an illustrator who's willing to work on a work for hire basis and is skilled in the style shown. And I would typically attach the style that I'm looking for. Ask them to contact you with a link to their portfolio and a budget range for the selected illustration style. So they're not going to be able to give you an exact budget, but what they will do is give you a range. They'll say, for that style, it could be anywhere from $50 to $75 per page. So then at least you know kind of what you're looking for. So I would tell them, I usually pay $50 for the full color sample. And if we're a good fit, we can move forward. Does that work for you? So this gives you kind of a framework to be able to start that conversation with the illustrator. These are some of the things that I do when I'm first reaching out. So I'm going to recommend that you put $150 aside in your budget, and it will be the best $150 that you are going to spend. And what I would recommend that you do with this is think about a character or a scene that's really important to you for your book. For me, it was my little Labradoodle. I wanted to know that the illustrator that I was going to work with was going to do a really good job of getting my little Labradoodle. And Labradoodles are kind of tricky to actually get right in an illustration. So I thought of a small scene, nothing too detailed. I put a little summary about what the story was about, a picture of my Labradoodle, so reference images is helpful to give the kind of explanation of what it is that you're looking for. Also, if you've got a style that you really loved, you found one or two, attach that and say, I really love this style, and put a little bit of information about your character. For example, if you are asking them to illustrate a little girl who's really sassy or who's really a bully or who's really shy, you want to talk about the character in a way that talks about what types of emotions and see how well the illustrator does with nailing emotion in the illustration sample. So make sure that, that little one pager you put together has some of that information in it. And then you're going to do this and you're going to pick 3 illustrators that you think might be a good choice. You're going to give them each $50 and the information you pulled together. And you're going to ask them to give you a full color sample. When they come back to you with that sample, you're going to provide them with some feedback, even if it's exactly perfect, just the way it is. I want you to find something that you want them to tweak. The reason is we want to see how well they're going to do with taking the constructive criticism, communicating, and how long does it take them to tweak it and get it back to you. Make a note of that communication skills. And then when you think you know the one that you want to work with, invite that person to a Zoom meeting and talk face to face about your project. You are going to find in some cases that will help you understand, how well does that person communicate? For me, it's, are they good at English? Can I understand them? Can they understand me? Do we have a connection? Like help build that connection a little bit. You also will be able to see whether or not your illustrator feels comfortable with just communicating in that way. I've actually had some illustrators that I was going to hire that said they refuse to do Zoom and that they only want to communicate through Messenger. So that didn't take long for me to say, no, I just don't work that way. At critical junctures, I always recommend that you get together and review your sketches. I'm not saying every week you're going to get on a call with them, but you're going to want to share and go through, be able to provide constructive criticism, be able to work through things. And it's important that they can communicate like that face to face. So I'm doing a small overview here of the illustration process. There's a lot more that goes into each step, and we're going to get much deeper in the future. For now, I just want to give you a brief overview. So let's just say after samples are done, right? So if you look at the top of this slide here, this was my second book of my little Labradoodle series. And this guy, it was a new illustrator because I switched illustrators between book 1 and book 2. And I wanted to make sure that he could do a good job with my Labradoodle character. So I had him do a character design. And what they normally will do is they'll start with sketching, yes, and they get the character right. And then they put them in different positions just to get on the same page based on the different things that the character is going to be doing within the book. So it's really cool to be able to see that coming together. That's one part that you'll probably spend some time on with your illustrator. If we look down here, you can see that the storyboard is a very rough sketch. Look at these puppies. I look at this storyboard. There's some placement of text. We got a template from the graphic designer so that the text was placed and then the illustrator can draw around it so that we don't have to try to fit in text after. So we know we can see some room. We see some cute puppies running in a very high level detail. And what a storyboard will do is flow the story from beginning to end. Now, what it is not is it's not detailed. It's just supposed to be an opportunity for you to see the placement of the various Like, what's the frame? What's the action that's going on? How do we expect to go from beginning of story all the way to end of story? And everybody gets on the same page. Yes, this is perfect. Oh, let's tweak this. This I don't like. And you get to see in spreads what that is going to look like at a very high level. Now, if you look at what the end, this is the puppy picture that was in my storyboard, and this is what it came out like in the final quality. So you can see there's a big difference. And of course, between here, there's sketching that takes this and makes it a little more finalized. So this became a sketch before it became colored in. It's so important to have a good team of people that you can lean on through the process. As you get more comfortable and with the process, and you may even start taking on some of the things that you would normally go to your graphic designer or to your illustrator for, definitely deciding before you actually sign that contract with your illustrator, it's going to need to say what size book that you are going to go with, right? Because they have to put the specs together that way. So deciding on the size, and then if you've got issues with the layout in any way, I mean, a good graphic designer will be able to work with you through all of that. To us, it's so huge, but to them, it's nothing. They could do that in their sleep. A lot of people think that they can lay things out themselves. They try to do their own cover. They take what the illustrator gives them and they try to lay it out. And you don't want to be there in the 11th hour trying to release your book weeks before Christmas, and it takes you 3 weeks to get it done because you don't have a professional designer helping you. And then, of course, at the end, we want to make sure that the files that the illustrator sends that go off to the graphic designer end up being the source files. Let's just take an example of maybe this comes in and it's close to the center here. We had a couple of books that we were working on where the illustrator kind of put it all the way, like almost right on the line. So when the book would be bound, you'd lose an important piece of information, especially if it's a spread. They might have one image going across both pages. So if one main important piece of information is here, somebody's face, you want to be able to move things around. And so by having things delivered in the right format, it's really easy for the graphic designer to click on a character and scooch it over, make things a little bigger and move them around a little bit. Now, some illustrators do get a little bit antsy about it. They don't like the idea that somebody else might be in there manipulating their images. But what I always tell them is that I will give them an opportunity to look at and to approve and provide any feedback to the graphic designer. If they don't like, what happened to their artwork, then we'll talk about it and we'll see if we can come to a resolution. So usually they're okay with it. This is the single best way for you to take months off of the illustration process. It is called the illustration brief. This is an example of one. I'm going to be uploading a few different examples. So on the far left here, maybe I can zoom in this a little bit bigger so that you can kind of see. This is in Excel. You could do it in Word, but what you want to do is provide the illustrator with, here's the page, here's the information, that the text that's going to be on the page, and any comments that you have, and then reference images. It could be clip art, it could be anything. We've had some kind of funny things that happen if you don't give good references to your illustrator. I had one project where this story included a little girl and her brother who were playing with slime in a pool. And it was like all gooey, and they said, and they're in a pool and they're playing with slime. We got the image back from the illustrator, and the illustrator had put them in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, not a little kiddie pool like we had in our brain, right? So sometimes you can say one thing and somebody will interpret it a different way. So here, the text on the page for the first one says, Let's all go to church. Thank our Lord up above. Oh, no, no, I say, staying in bed is what I love. So the story's about a little boy who does not want to go to church. The fact that the author, took a little bit of clip art to help tell the story. There's mama sticking her head in and saying, come on, son, it's time to get up. And a little thing about with this little boy of like, this is kind of the position I want him in. Like, go away, mom. This is not going to work for me. I don't want to get up. As we start to see some of the things that she provided for the illustrator, you'll see, this one, she's got him hanging off the bed. Again, he's like, ugh, I don't want to do anything. So you can see here, we're giving some direction to the illustrator. If you want some details, so here it says, draw him hanging off the bed in PJs, looking too weak to get up, over exaggerating. And as you see, she's got this image here that kind of shows, and there's nothing that you can't find if you go on Google and you type whatever it is you're looking for, boy hanging off bed, cartoon, type the word cartoon after it. You'll get some really cool images that you can help tell your story and communicate to the illustrator what it is you're looking for. Whatever your character is going to be doing, you definitely want to spend some time looking for some images of the clothing that you want them to dress your character in. Too often we've gotten back things and it's like, oh, why didn't we give them some reference images? Because they just designed something that my character would never wear. And now they've wasted all that time sketching out something when I could have just given them a clip art or something from a magazine that shows this is how this character dresses. These are the colors that this character wears. These are the shoes that I want her to be wearing. If it's important or if it's something that's going to come up later, it's really helpful to give your illustrator these reference images. Put it in a brief. It can be in Word, it can be in PowerPoint, it can be in Excel. Whatever you want to put it in is perfectly fine, but walk through the whole process beginning to end. After you sign the contract, you've got your illustration brief. The next thing is to put a meeting together and walk through your illustration brief with that illustrator on a Zoom call. Let that illustrator ask questions. Sometimes they'll come up with ideas. What if we did this? Do I have any flexibility here with regard to the setting? And you get to really have those discussions that can make exactly what you're putting together go through so much faster. So here she put an example of what a little boy's room might look like. If you do a good job on the illustration brief, it can be the difference to save you months and months and months on your illustration. Here's a good opportunity. Let's, down further in the book here, she's got a little bit of information about the playground. Like, here's a sample of what I want the playground to look like. Here's a sample of the church I got married in. I want you to put that church in this book. So these are the kinds of things that come up as you're working through it. And now with this, one of the tips is work within your budget. Now you're going to spend time and you're going to take that step. I've got a budget spreadsheet that I've uploaded. It's already out there in your Thinkific course. You're going to go through that. And if you are looking to keep your illustration within the like 50 to 60 per page, that's a single one-sided page, then you are going to these are samples of within the $50 to $60 range. These are some sample designs of what you might expect. I'm going to move forward. And if you're looking at like the $70 to $90 per page, you're getting more complex artwork, more detail, more shading that kind of makes things pop a little bit, and more characters. So that's where that 70 to 90 per page might come in. Now you can look at some of these and see that they are much more complex much more detailed. The characters, it just a lot more effort for the illustrator to work on. If you have a lot of characters, or sometimes it's just the specific style, like if you are creating something and you want it to be very realistic instead of cartoony. For example, one of the authors that I worked with has a book about her family ski trip, and she wanted it to be very realistic and look like her family, not cartoon versions of her family. That was very, very time consuming and a lot more effort. So you would probably be at this top range here or even higher for some of those, depending on, backgrounds and things like that. Now, one thing I would recommend is if you fall in love with this, right? Like, wow, I really love this style, but I don't have $100 to spend. My budget is $70 per page. It doesn't mean you can't do this. What it does mean is you can go to the illustrator and say, what can I do to this style to bring it from $100 worth of effort to $75 worth of effort per page? And they will probably tell you less detail on the background. Perhaps some of the shading would be less because it won't be quite so 3D. That takes a lot of extra effort. And then, so we can bring it down to something that would be more in line with something like this. You can see that there's a background. It's still beautiful, but it's not at the complex level that the higher priced illustrations are. For my second book, I decided to have spreads done. That's another way, because a spread that is basically one picture across 2 pages can also cost less. It's less time intensive than 2 separate illustrations on that same spread. Like, I had my dogs playing in the yard together. And so I had them spread across 2 pages instead of playing together on one page, all the dogs, then on the other page, something else that was busy. And instead of it being, $50 times 2 for 2, it ends up being maybe 65 or 70 for the one spread. So it is less than the price of typically of 2 separate ones. And I kind of like the impact of opening your book and having a nice, beautiful spread go across 2 pages. So plan spreads in to your book. I ended up with my second book doing all spreads because I just loved it. I loved the look of it. So one of the things that I want to mention too, as a tip, is you want to make sure that you have things in a contract. Once you selected your illustrator, I have a contract that you are more than welcome to use. When I did my first book, I made a mistake with my contract, and the contract I signed was terrible. It was like all to benefit the illustrator. And I had to go back afterwards, and I had to have legal professional help me unwind and unravel that contract and then do up a new contract. And it cost me money, it cost me time, it cost me a bunch of legal fees. And I think I paid like $12,000 to go through that process. And so besides the $7,500 that I was spending on my picture book just on illustrations, it was a crazy lesson. So I had this attorney that I worked with create templates of an NDA, templates of a contract that is highly helpful, and it's really going to protect the author. So it's work for hire. You own the work. You don't pay royalties. Now, not every one of you is going to work with this exact contract, but I'm making it available to you. It is my recommended format. Every single one of those illustrators on the list will accept the contract. They have already, worked with a contract like this, or they wouldn't have been on the list. You can modify it and put it in for yourself. If you have any issues with, the contract, or you use a different one, just make sure that you get appropriate consultation with a legal professional. Best practices to avoid delays: communicating your character traits and physical traits of your characters That's important because you don't want to be doing that afterwards. Just make sure you include that in your illustration brief. Agree on the milestones and timelines with your illustrator. Get that into the contract. If you want to include incentives or penalties, I prefer to include incentives. So if you are rushing for like a Christmas release and you need to get your book out by October, it might be wise to add an incentive to say, if you deliver by the end of September, I'm going to include a bonus of X. Or if you miss the final deadline, you're going to be assessed a penalty. So that comes off the final payment. So those kinds of things I've used and I've put into contracts and haven't had any issue at all with using it. Make your changes during the storyboarding process, during the sketching process. By the time when you say the sketches are approved and you're ready to go, don't have fundamental changes to start over on a page or on a character. It's going to be very expensive. In the IT world, we would say that the code was frozen. Like, okay, the requirements are frozen now. We cannot go and just add new things. In order to stick to the schedule, the timeline, and the budget, we must stop with changes. Because if you need to go back and make major changes and it's already in coloring, it's going to be a lot more expensive and a lot of frustration for your illustrator, because most of the time authors think that that should just be included in the price of what they're doing. And they're asking to double or even triple effort in a project. And that can cause a lot of angst, and it's caused a lot of problems between authors and illustrators. So don't do that. If the artist has a certain process that they want to follow, I would say respect the process, be open, allow them to be, creative, and provide you with feedback of how they want you to work with them. And I'll give you an example. My first illustrator told me, I'm going to go and give you batches of your sketches. I'm going to deliver 3 batches. I want you to hold all feedback until I delivered all of them, all 3 batches. Don't tell me what you like or don't like. I don't even want to know you're excited. Like, I need to get through all this, and then we get together and we talk about it all. That was fine. So if they have certain requirements, try to respect that process for them. Don't over communicate. If you send 50 emails to them with ideas, or constantly instant message them, you're going to be adding an awful lot of work to them in just trying to figure out what it is you want. So get your requirements into that illustration brief and respect their need to really work without being constantly interrupted. Otherwise, it can cause, again, delays, cost, and frustration. Limiting the number of rounds of revision is important. Usually a couple rounds should be enough. You should be able to go back and forth a couple of times. And as long as you have that good relationship, you should be able to get things done. If that turns into version 13, you probably have a problem with the whole scope creep or just a lot of frustration. And last but not least, don't take things personally. It's something that you'll need to understand. If it's the illustrator, you're giving feedback to the illustrator, you don't want the illustrator to take everything personally. If the illustrator is wanting to change things, this is your baby, but it can get heated if you want to be able to just not take things personally. Just keep your eyes on working through this and treat each other with respect and dignity, and you'll get through that process with that much less stress. And if you've got a great illustrator, don't be afraid to tag them in your posts. And, if you're posting a sneak peek of your cover, thank the illustrator, tag them, help promote that person who's working with you and doing an awesome job, because that will help give a lot of its positive feedback and some pride in what he's doing as well. It helps to promote his business. He'll help to promote yours. So I hope this was helpful. I will tell you that it can seem very over one lesson at a time. Do the action item that belongs there. Set up time with me and we can have a one-on-one and I can hopefully help you to organize or talk through the next steps. If you're having trouble connecting with an illustrator or finding a graphic designer, those are areas I can help guide you with as well. We have great resources in this group, and you are going to become a great resource to others as you learn more and more, and hopefully stay as part of the alumni team. This has been a great day, and I hope it was informative. Have a wonderful night, everyone.